Okay, we will actually get started here in about 5 minutes. We're waiting for a few more of our guests. And so as people are trickling in, we will start here in just a few minutes. Good morning. My name is Phil Cabucci, and I am the Community Affairs Director for Nashville Pride. Today, we are going to be joined in conversation with a number of individuals from our community to engage in a conversation around the intersection of LGBTQIA plus life and race. And so this should be a very fascinating conversation. I am looking forward to hearing from each of the members of our community who have so graciously agreed to engage in conversation with us today. It's going to be a wide-ranging conversation, and I look forward to hearing from each of you. We will have a time for question and answer towards the end of each hour. We do start, we will take a quick break at 9:55 for 5 minutes, and then pick the conversation back up starting at 10 o'clock. And so with that said, I would like for us to go in a round with our panelists today and introduce yourselves and a little bit about what you do, and we'll take it from there. So I'll start with Maxine Spencer.
Hi, everybody. So Maxine, she, they, and I'm an organizer with Workers' Dignity. And do I go ahead and pass it off to somebody else?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, I'm gonna pass it off to Dwayne. I feel like you could feel that I was looking at you.
I knew you were gonna do that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Maxine. Hey, everyone. I'm Dwayne Jenkins. I work at Nashville Cares as the director of the My House facility, which includes the My House Clinic, and I'm also the president and founder of Nashville Black Pride. And I'm going to go to, let's see, I'll go to the doctor, Brian Marshall.
So silly. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me in this space. Happy Friday. Ooh, we made this a Friday, amen. I am, many may know, I'm the founder of Mash Up Nashville, which is a nonprofit which addresses health disparities and social injustices of Black gay males and trans women of color. And I'm also a senior program manager in the Office of Health Equity at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I do serve on the Pride board in our city, and also serve on the community, I'm the chair for the Ryan White Planning Council for our community needs assessment. And I'm gonna throw it off to my cousin, Brandon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Marshall. I am the digital director for Mayor John Cooper's office, as well as the LGBTQ liaison. And I also serve on the board of Nashville Launchpad here in the city. So I've been a member of Nashville Launchpad for a little over a year. I will turn things on over to Erin Law.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin, they or she pronouns, and I am the embodiment and somatics curator at Activist Theology Project. And I'm also a former dancer and massage therapist. I'll pass it to Gail.
Like me, Gail?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. What am I? Because I'm at work. So first of all, my name is Gail. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an area coordinator with the YMCA of Middle Tennessee, the founder of Tennessee Parent Alliance, which is a nonprofit still in its fledgling state that deals with eliminating successful barriers to parenting for working class parents throughout the state of Tennessee. And that also honors, several different family structures. So, and I identify as queer, so I'm here. And queer and I'm here. Set of things. I cannot, I guess I can look at I will pass it to Delana if she can go.
Hey y'all, I'm also at work, but I wanted to just listen in. I can already tell this is a dynamic panel of individuals, so I'm happy to be here. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Family and Community Engagement Coordinator for LEAD Public Schools, specifically LEAD Brick Church Middle School. I manage recruitment, engagement, community partnerships, and social media for this campus. And currently in this climate, I am trying my hardest to push us as a campus more, and really as a network more, into boots on the ground advocacy work, just to kind of jump off of Gail, just trying to eliminate those barriers to successful parenting. As you know, I do work in a so to speak, marginalized community with a high demographic of African American parents who are working class. So just doing everything that I can to advocate for them and to help them learn how to use their own voice to advocate for themselves. I will pass it to, Odessa. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Not at all. Good morning, good people. Odessa Kelly. I am the executive director of Stand Up Nashville, and I am also a congressional candidate. So yeah, just glad to be here amongst you guys on the panel as well. I am no longer on any boards because of, y'all can understand different reasons, but yeah, associated to a lot of them. So glad to see you all and be here in this space with you. And I will pass it, let me see, Lauren Fitzgerald.
Hello, everyone. I am joining in at the last minute, and just like a real one, I'm on 2 meetings right now. So I'm gonna try to be quick, which is hard for me. I am the managing director for the Intercultural Leadership Institute. I am the interim director as of this past Monday, the interim director for the Jefferson Street United Merchants Partnership. I am an advocate for community. I go by she, her, they pronouns. I'm on Cherokee and Shawnee land. I'm just happy to be here listening.
Pass it along to...
I'll pass it to whoever wants to go and who hasn't gone yet.
Dr. Robin.
Hi there, folks. Good morning. And yes, happy Friday. I'm glad that we made it through another week. I'm happy to be here with y'all. It's my second CNM event where we're talking about important things. I'm a variety of things. I'm a public scholar, faculty member at Duke Divinity School, trying to live my best life and reduce harm as best as I can. Identify as non-binary, trans, and Latinx. My pronouns are they, them. And I'll pass it to Meredith Cox.
Morning, friends. I'm Reverend Meredith Cox. I use they, them pronouns. And I'm a new hire at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I am excited to be the staff chaplain for LGBTQ patients, families, health, you name it, I'm there. So excited to learn with you all. Thank you. Everett, would you like to go?
Sure, yeah. No, I'm excited to be here as well. My name is Everett Davis. I use he, him pronouns. Yeah, I'm executive director of Network for Sustainable Solutions, where we make a one-stop shop for all entities and individuals that are doing good sustainability work in the state. So just trying to pull together everybody who's out there for accessible, just for people to access it more easily. And as I identify as queer myself, so I'm very excited to just be here and listening and a part of the conversation. And I'll pass it to, oh gosh, who hasn't gone? Brandon, have you not gone? Brandon Marshall?
I did go.
Oh, you did go, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Who
We
hasn't
have
gone?
Eliza, Rachel, Adam, and Richard, I believe, haven't gone.
I can go. My name is Elisa, and I'm the Fair Housing Council. I'm the Fair Housing Specialist at the Tennessee Fair Housing Council, and I'm super excited to be here and learn so we can protect the LGBTQ community in housing.
And let's see here, Rachel.
Hey, good morning. My name is Rachel Salava. I'm the Outreach and Advocacy Coordinator with the Greater Nashville Regional Council. We're a regional council of governments spanning 13 counties in Middle Tennessee, and I work within our Aging and Disability Services.
Hey, Adam.
Adam Bronstone. I'm a Director of Planning with the Jewish Federation of Nashville, and just very interested in all these types of conversations and hearing from people in different tables that I don't usually operate in. And you'll apologize, I told Phil already, I have a meeting at 9:30 that I'm going to pop off to, and then hopefully come back on. So when I come back on and I ask questions that people already answered, please excuse my absence.
And thank you, Adam. And last but not least, my friend Ray Holloman, who's also joining us on the panel today.
Hey everybody, good morning. My name is Ray Holloman. My day job is I work for HCA Healthcare and I do business continuity and disaster recovery testing. But in my free time, I do a lot of trans advocacy, and I'm currently the chair of the Tennessee Departments of Health HIV Prevention Transgender Task Force. And so that's where I spend a lot of time just helping to make sure that trans people have access to healthcare throughout the entire state of Tennessee as a kind of a statewide coalition.
Great, thank you so much. So as part of our conversation today, we are going to have what I would like to say is a robust conversation around the intersection of LGBTQIA+ life here in Middle Tennessee, the intersection of race, gender, and sexuality, and how that all relates back into physical identity. And so to start, I'm going to go to some of my dear friends to kind of just give us a background of what is what the membership has looked like over the last couple of years, and its history as it relates to being a member of the BIPOC community, but also a member of the LGBTQIA+ community. I am going to make it very clear that I am not calling anyone old, but I am looking towards your knowledge of lived experience. And so specifically, I'd like to call on Dwayne, Odessa, and Brian Marshall to talk a little bit about what it's been like here in Nashville. And so I'll let you all take it off.
I guess I can start. Were you saying like go in that order, or is it?
It doesn't matter. So just as we want to engage in conversation on this topic of like what has it been like as a member of the community, and sort of have these two different identities, but also the same at the same time.
So again, good morning, everyone. I feel safe in this space, so I'm going to speak freely. You know, like we ask in all spaces, please give some grace. If there's something, correct me, push back on me. If anyone feels as though like I'm trying to look and see if everyone's pronouns. If I miss something, just talking quickly, I guarantee you it was not an intent. So, and I'll definitely correct it. But I will say this, it has been hectic from my standpoint, especially being a person that is involved in social justice work and movement work, and especially movement work that is involved around money and the economy. and how that ties into our identity, especially since I identify as an African American, because I identify as female as well. There are anti-Black tropes that run through every single other thing or platform that exists and that lives, right? And a lot in the past especially in the past 10 years, as we all know that Nashville is in an economic boom. We've actually been in an economic boom for the past 15 years. But, seeing the fruition and how that is coming about today, I have been put in a lot of situations where a lot of people expect me to take off one hat and just wear another, or not acknowledge, the indifferences that may be happening under one. So at the same time, I will say that Nashville has come, I guess, a very long way. I feel extremely safe and I feel comfortable in Nashville as an openly gay Black woman. I don't know if I could say that being in majority other cities here in the state of Tennessee. And I think the city is progressive in the mindset of accepting identity and lifestyles for the most part. We're still going to have our caveats and little pockets of mindsets and thoughts, but that's fine. You can have your thoughts. I don't ever feel as though it is a threat to me, And then doing a lot of volunteer work with youth, especially youth, Black youth who identify as trans. I will say this, we still have a long way to go, but I think that we have so many people who have comfortably sitting in these spaces to represent and help transition through that we are in a better space than we were years ago, yet we still have a long way to go, and a lot of the issues that I hear with youth going through this issue today is dealt with their relationship and spirituality, because spirituality is based usually off of racial identity and the backgrounds that come with that. And then too, just, the world has become very accepting, I think we've done a good job of trying to normalize it's okay for you to be openly who you are, but in the state of Tennessee, as we all know, it can be ridiculous. So that's me trying to give a 2-minute from the past to now, so I can pass it on to the other two individuals.
Go on, Dwayne.
You're on mute.
All right, sorry about that. So I think from my time moving from New York State to Tennessee in '94, there have been a lot of different changes. Speaking within the field that I work in, HIV/AIDS, and then of course with the Pride organization, it has sparked and grown. One of the things that is challenging for us in both the health field as well as the encompassing of having a Pride organization is I call it the thirst or the hunger that used to be around in the mid 90s and then 2000s. As we came up, the thirst isn't there. And although I'm a champion and love, all of the new gadgets that we have and the access that the internet and the phones have given us, it also has taken away some of the important things of getting people together in spaces and having a need to want to know more about our history, wanting to know more about what it is to be in a relationship with someone, even if it's just a friendship. It's just a little bit different now. And again, in a virtual world, even beyond COVID and Zoom and doing things like this, because this is excellent that we can all do this and not have to worry about meeting somewhere. I do think that that has been one of the bigger challenges. Also, what is a challenge is the secrecy of a lot of programming that can happen. So we all represent different organizations, and a lot of times it still feels that we are, throwing and pressuring people to remember or at least share. So, share that you know about a clinic, share that you know where to get tested for HIV, share that you know where to get free condoms, share this, and people are keeping it close to the vest for some strange reason. And we always seem to be battling uphill to go, no, we do offer these things in the community. And it's been offered for over 30 years, or it's been offered for this long. So I've seen the growth and I'm happy about that, but I'm still struggling with some of the challenges that I'm not sure how to really get around as we continue to move forward. So, all right, BIM, it's your turn.
All right, thank you so much. I really didn't have any prepared statements. I'm gonna try to talk through this as it comes to my head. So if I say something wrong, y'all just bear with me here. I had to give a little perspective to myself, being someone who's from Nashville, but also moved away from Nashville and came back to Nashville. And I think that, growing up here, so I would say that my intersectionality understanding of myself in Nashville happened in different stages. Because when I grew up here, I always went to performing arts schools. And so I didn't at that time delve or understand the sexuality part of myself, but that wasn't something that I explored, but I always knew I was Black. But I always went to schools that were mix of race, different genders, and you go to an art school, you're gonna have your sprinkle of gays, straights, and all that. And so it was kind of normal to me to be in diverse settings with different people, and nobody seemingly really judged everybody. It was just, that's what it is. And so I think that maybe I was probably blindsided by the fact that in performing arts spaces, that there are different people that live in our society, and we all love and support everybody, seemingly. I moved to Atlanta, and I was there for 5 years, and then going from Nashville to Atlanta, it was so Nashville was Blackness, Atlanta was gayness. So I'm like, okay, so so I'm gay. Okay, so now I'm Black and now I'm gay, and I'm gay because Atlanta is,
yeah.
It really pushed it out there for me. And just the openness and the freedom that I gained there. When I came back to Nashville, I was like, uh-oh, can I still be that person that I was in Atlanta here in Nashville? And so it really has been a journey. And I think that journey was kind of formed when I first started volunteering at National Cares for Young Brothers United with my friend Chris Goodwin, who was working with Dwayne Jenkins. I volunteered for 2 years. I'm like, where these private groups? Where were these private groups when I was growing up? Because if I knew about these private groups growing up, I probably would have had a better understanding of myself, knowing there were resources available, knowing there were people who were like me that I could talk to help me navigate through this. So back to your point, Dwayne, the secrecy of these groups is something I didn't think about until I got older. Even when I first started working, my first job, which was Project Una, which was a program here that addressed mental health and health disparities around HIV and AIDS and homelessness. I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize all these issues existed in my city, but they're addressed behind closed doors. I'm wondering, why did I never hear about any of these things in my school? Why did these programs were not mentioned in the public school system? Why did my church not ever talk about HIV and AIDS and Black and gay individuals and connecting those two together? And so I think throughout the years, only because I worked in the field that I understood the resources were available, which then had me pose the question, why are we in the dark here? Why? I know Dwayne, and I know now Dwayne is a legend, but why doesn't everybody know Dwayne? Why isn't everybody throwing money to Dwayne to help him with services to increase awareness? Why are we not seeing billboards about the work that Dwayne is doing in our community? Not just Dwayne, but Reverend Edwin Sanders, who has a nonprofit organization that back in the 80s, his church implemented a program and a clinic to address individuals living with HIV and AIDS. And I'm like, I come here every day. I get to meet people that I never got to meet, who are dealing with all these different issues. And it's happening in secrecy. And even when people, it was, when I say it was a journey, I remember people would come to my office, even my parents, and it was like, what's happening here? And I would even be scared to say what was happening there because I didn't know if I should or not. And so I think over time, here in Nashville, we're seeing more of that presence and more of that acceptability of those spaces. However, I think there are still challenges because to me, it still feels like there's a lot of secrecy around that. I worked for another organization here in Nashville where I had an opportunity to work with our teens and going to different high schools and having to get into those high schools and discover who these LGBTQ youth are to bring them to a program that in my mind still felt like a private space. However, I think that some of those private spaces are needed because they may not feel comfortable in Nashville, which in itself is a problem. So why don't people feel comfortable in this city that's thriving, that's growing, that's changing? But the sexuality part of it, we still have to keep closed behind closed doors. And so I'm kind of, I'm working through my thoughts here. So I'm hoping that others can share so I can kind of get, wrap my mind around this. Even someone who's been working in this field for all this time, and even someone who is Black, and even someone who is gay, there's still things that I have to wrap my mind around. So I'm gonna stop there because I'll go forever and ever. I'll let whoever else is gonna talk speak now.
Brian, I really appreciate what you were saying, and I think it ties interestingly into what Dr. Robin was saying and said in the chat here, but that there's still this repressive history around sex and sexuality in the South. And then when you layer in that element of race and gender, there's a whole nother level of things to combat. Odessa, you were going to say something?
Yeah, Brian, I was going to say you made a good point about the secrecy of it, National Native born as well. I distinctly remember being 10 years old and telling this girl, like, why don't we go together? And we're still friends today. She's like, Odessa, you gay. And I remember the next day being at school and we had this epic, like, conversation at the lunchroom about, like, y'all tell this certain girl that she should be my girlfriend. Ended up being about 50-50, right? But at the same time, I think too, because of my popularity, the fact that I was a star athlete and all those things, that it was a little easier for me to be openly gay. I started the GSA, at our school, and all those type of things. But it wasn't until I got to college and went to one of the it's crazy. It's like you're saying, the city is thriving, but nightlife for gay people, you asked me, was better. And I came out of high school in 2000. I was in college 2000 through 2004. Was way better for Black people. Just little holes in the wall clubs that were up everywhere, So you know what I'm talking about. And it was me kicking it in all these different clubs is where I met and learned about some of these groups that you're talking about. And I had no idea that they existed too. I didn't even know that I should care about having an identity as LGBTQ until then, because my priority was always an identity as being Black and not knowing that there was an intersectionality between the two. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Powerful thought there, Odessa. Thank you. Maxine, I see you smirking and I appreciate it very much, but I want to bring in this element of the work that you do and sort of bridge the past to the present, right? Because not only has your work been, in your current capacity with Workers' Dignity, but you had a history with Oasis Center and the work there. And I think that, when we look to the future, collectively, our community always looks to the young people and to youth and young adults to help push more progressive ideas and create more acceptance. And so interested to see how you can sort of bridge this, and then we'll get into some deeper conversation.
Well, first,
no pressure. No,
you good. Well, first I started smirking a little bit because that is from my understanding of the history of Odessa, that is what it started to feel like. Because when I came into town back in 2014, I think there was at least one of them still open left, Vibe? Yeah. And then it closed. So like that is always the feeling that I have gotten. And while I'm still technically by some definitions, by a lot of definitions, still a youth for right now, still a youth. Ain't got much time left, but I'ma still stand in it. I'm gonna stand in it for as long as I got it. And then like try to connect it a little bit to not just work from workers' dignity, but work at Oasis. I mean, from what I've always been able to tell with the young people that I work with is that a lot of times folks like would still like know of like just their own different social networks, but when it comes to things that go on in town, I mean, unless it's like very big, it's very like heavily advertised, then like sometimes you just don't know about it. Like you just don't know about these different resources. And really, I always feel weird because like this is like trying to translate a little bit of their perspective, you know, from the perspectives that I've gained from experience with like working on young people in town, and then also just trying to like be honest to a little bit my own. But from what I've always seen is that, you know, each school in of itself is its own really unique ecosystem. Basically, it's its own culture, it's its own vibe, and so many young people that I've met have really been able, in lots of instances, been able to find out their own ways to thrive in this town, in the city, and then in their own schools specifically. Especially like when it comes to like schools where it's like majority of the Black kids, which is where I focused a lot of like my work at Oasis. And it's always been like very wonderful to see because to me, I grew up in Memphis, so like coming here to Nashville and then also being like a younger person, like working with like younger people in Nashville and like seeing like the ways that like their school education like differs from mine, and we're just like a couple years apart, you know. It's always been so it's been so like present to me because I felt like even though so many people have like been able to find these different opportunities to thrive, in some cases it feels like because it's like because we technically call it like you're still like a minority and like Memphis is like a majority minority city. There's so many obstacles still that like people are facing because they're Black, you know, especially, and it feels very heightened in this city, especially when we're going to work with young people that are in our community, that are going through high school here. It feels like, you know, there's like so many statistics that you could quote around like LGBTQ plus young people and like the disparities they face, and which those are present in the school system. I like work with young people that like have gone through different facets of that. But then to also highlight that they're Black in most instances, and then to see what the level of support looks like, and then who starts supporting them, and like who starts speaking up. That is like one of the dividing lines that's always been like very, very difficult for me to grasp. Because when I was growing up, like even just a couple years ago, I never really saw that there was any of that kind of support for like just queer kids in general. But I mean, there was a lot of support for us just like as like Black kids, but we never really got to that point. And so now I'm in this kind of point over here where it's like you can have a little bit, there's a lot more support for like queer kids, but then when it comes to like Black queer kids, especially Black queer and trans youth, then that's part of the issue is that like it's so difficult to get everybody into that space, to like prime the space, to make it really ready and make it really a space that where young people can truly still thrive and like have it specifically as their own. I've been in situations where it's just been so difficult because adults just make a lot of things hard. Really, we just do. And there's sometimes it's, you know, like part of like the just general environment of like where they are. There's like lots of other issues, but then other times it's just trying to at least figure out how to get the adults to like be organized in such a fashion to let this truly thrive and to let young people kind of really take the lead in that. So yeah, I think that's a good little place to stop right now.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Ray, I want to bring you in and Dr. Robin probably in the same vein here. because Odessa brought in the visibility of trans youth here in our state and in our region. And Maxine, you've obviously worked with trans youth of color in our communities as well. The lived experience of those individuals is far more difficult, and we obviously also know that Black trans women are at a much higher rate of not being safe in certain areas and certain communities. And there's a sort of a epidemic in terms of the murdering of those of trans lives. So maybe we can speak to that a little bit. And Ray, specifically with your work outside of HCA, and how that intersects. And Robin, I would love for you to interject as well into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just saw, if you look across the legislature this year, there was this huge attack on trans youth. I mean, that's really what it is. And I mean, on trans people, you know, overall, but really this huge attack on trans youth. And with my role on being on the task force, we do a lot of education for the trans community, which includes trans youth. But we also are a part of state government. And that's kind of where, in a weird way, we get our funding comes through the state government and goes to United Way. And so we were told to put the brakes on. We had this whole thing to do some trans youth health education this year. And we were kind of told, like, not told, but I was like, you know what, this is not safe. If we want our trans task force to exist into next year and for them not to take it away, we can't speak about certain topics through the task force. And so we have to engage other organizations to help us. That's not the way we should be doing things, but that's the climate that trans individuals in the state are living in, and especially our trans youth. And so it's like, how do we reach them? Because I know when I grew up here in Nashville, been here my entire life, there was not this education. I admit, like, I grew up, just bringing back that intersectionality, I grew up in what would now be considered Brentwood, Nippers Corner area. I went to basically an all white elementary school, and then middle school and high school I went to East on Gallatin Road, so a completely different experience, you know. And so when I started at East, that school was 50-50, you know, black and white, and by the time I left it had gone 80-20 black, because they added a 30% rule that 30% of the students had to come from the East Nashville area. So we completely changed, but it also changed that demographic, because I did not feel accepted as being, you know, trying to figure out what my sexual identity was. This was even before I was thinking about transitioning. And so it's like, youth today are so much more in tune with that kind of information because they have that access. Like, the internet is out here, TikTok and all these things. So we really have to meet the students where they're at. And so, like, I try to, whenever I engage with students and with youth, I'm like, what do you need from us? I won't call myself an elder, but from us people that have been here for a while, what can we help you with? Because a lot of times the students I work with, I primarily do a lot of volunteering at Overton High School. And so a lot of times those kids may be facing, you know, they may be refugees or immigrants from other countries, or their parents are working jobs and just don't have the education to help them get into college. And I'm like, I don't care about where you go to college. How can I help you, as like, you are struggling with your, like, you know, your gender identity or sexuality? How can I help you work through that? Because you may not be getting that support anywhere else. And you see all this stuff in the media about how the state doesn't want you here, is trying to take away your rights. Like, how can I help connect you to those different things? Because that's really where we're seeing this gap at right now, is that there aren't, providers are scared to provide services to trans youth because they don't know if they're going to be protested like everything else. And so it's just like, it's very hard to try to get them. It's like, but you don't want a kid to go through unnecessary struggle and make them wait till they're 18 so they can get medical services. But we only have a couple of providers that will provide services across the entire state to youth. It makes it very difficult to connect. And so that's where we've got to continue pushing and saying, hey, we don't prescribe anything else in this type of way. Why are we attacking this subset of kids that just want to be kids and want to be themselves and be comfortable? So that's kind of what I've kind of really seen is just like we do not have that access. And then there's just so many disparities with trans individuals interacting with the healthcare system. And me working for a healthcare company, it is extremely frustrating at times, but that is a whole other topic that gets into a whole lot of other levels.
I would co-sign all of what Ray said, and I think the only other thing that I would add, which has been said in different ways already, is that we have systems in place that actually circumvent things like liberation and equity. And until we destabilize those systems, one of those being supremacy culture, which is a very large system that snuffs the life out of marginalized people and multiply marginalized people, until we, what I say, compost the bullshit, which is a technical theological term that I talk about, uh, until we can get people like Odessa Kelly elected and others, we're gonna continue facing the system. And the system has conscripted each of us into its tentacles. And so we've got to do a lot of work to reduce the talons, the impact of the talons of the system on us and our communities, which keeps us very, very busy all the time, which is why conversations like this are really important for community awareness. But really, we have got to shift power dynamics. The dominant culture, and by that I mean cis, white, able-bodied men, until we shift power out of the hands of the death culture, we are going to continue to be having these same kinds of conversation. As a Latinx person whose family is an immigrant family, I'm petrified of how refugees are going to be treated coming from Afghanistan, let alone the sexual minorities and gender minorities in that community. So we have really got a lot of work to do. And, as a theologian and ethicist, I am always looking at the ways in which religion has been weaponized against our community. And how do we actually pivot out of these death-bringing systems, mostly informed by toxic theology, toxic religious practices across the board? And how do we create systems and structures that create things and create conditions like abundance and abundant life? This is a process. It requires a diversity of tactics. It requires community intervention, and it's going to require each of us to figure out what our part is and play that part very, very well.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. I think that's a really powerful, almost space to stop for a quick second and see if any of our attendees have questions or comments that they would like to add to the conversation.
I can add, I've had no one knock on my door and bother me, so this is great that I get to like be in my cubby. And thank you so much, Dr. Robin, for sharing that. I grew up a PK, which in the Black community, people know, preacher's kid. My whole family were pastors and ministers. And I will say, like, growing up in attending predominantly white institutions in middle schools and elementary schools up north in Michigan, where I was raised, I mean, white church and Black church are very different. It's very, very different. It's a different experience. And especially when you're in that, directly kind of in that dynasty, so to speak, that religious dynasty. And I can just, I remember, and my cousin is still going through this journey. He's kept his him pronouns, him, he pronouns. He came out. And unfortunately, he was really outed before he was ready. And we are somewhat close in age. We all grew up together. And so he felt very comfortable having those conversations with me. And it was such a vicious cycle because we were raised very homophobic in the name of religion. And I felt as if I always did not have the tools or the talking points because I was also learning and unlearning to help him through that. And I think that that speaks to just, again, like this toxicity and just this vicious cycle of, like, you know, when you know better you do better, but no one taught us better. We had to teach ourselves. And so now we're able to have, you know, very candid conversations, my little cousin and I, and he's thankfully living in his truth. But I couldn't imagine, you know, what that would look like for him being in that environment. And he's moved out since he had to move out, but I couldn't imagine what it would be like for him in that environment if he didn't have me or someone else or another family member advocating for him, even when it was tough to do so in front of our family. So it's, I mean, it's taught, a lot of it is generational, but I, you know, at the very same time, it's like when you have to unlearn. You know, if you're doing someone harm or you're doing a community harm by even thinking the thoughts that you think or having the views that you have to unlearn that. And regardless of your background or whatever, like it's a process, but it has to be done. So that's kind of my personal take on it.
Delana, thank you for that. Aaron, I'm going to actually bring you into the conversation here. You know, Delana brought up this idea of unlearning, and specifically in your work with Activist Theology Project, you are leading an effort or a training course on unraveling whiteness. And so, what from a power perspective, right? Because there's a lot of white men in power. Where can we make change, and where is the sort of the foundational start place that we can go as a collective? And that might get heavy. Hi, Odessa.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that is a big question. So I approach this work from a slightly different inroad. I think there's a lot of work being done around sort of the DEI kind of basics in the world. And, you know, we can see where that really falls short and can actually be like re-traumatizing around race. And so my approach just comes from the body, and that I think that's kind of where supremacy culture, like Robin was talking about, it having its talons in us. I think that supremacy culture would have us believe that we don't have bodies, and that we just sort of push that down, especially as white people. And so a lot of my work is trying to invite fellow white people who are up for it to learn where supremacy culture actually lives in their bodies, and then to be able to use these bodies, which are read as having more power, even though we don't actually have more power. It's perceived that way, and certainly the systems are set up to keep it that way. But when we recognize where we're holding the power and how we're misusing that in our bodies at a neurological level, so not even just what are my thoughts, but like, how is my body reacting in this moment, which a lot of us kind of can't feel anymore, then I think that we can make change. So it's unfortunately this really slow ass process that just takes a long time, because it actually is about cultivating awareness. I think it's really interesting. It's been really cool to hear everybody speak, because I've been here since 2003. And I was a substitute teacher in Metro Nashville public schools, like on and off all over the place. And I actually used to teach as a guest at Nashville School of the Arts. So I don't know if Dr. Brian, is that your name? Dr. Brian? Did you go there?
Yes, class of 2003. I know I just look young.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. So that's actually when I got there, was in 2003. So yeah, and so I just, it's been really interesting to reflect and like see so many of my students who came through there, and having this sort of mecca, like little safe space that they could be themselves fully in all of their fullness. And so anyway, it's just been really cool to see that. But yeah, as sort of my I guess path has ventured beyond or past dance a little bit. I've been really interested in like how do these things all intersect. So how do we look at how we're how power really is organized. And I'm thinking about, I don't know if y'all have read this Tema Okun and Kenneth Jones document that talks about the characteristics of white supremacy culture. It's been sort of floating around. It was written in 2001, but it's been floating around in Tema Okun recently. Kenneth Jones is no longer with us, bless his soul. But Tema Okun has updated her work to sort of match where we are right now. And so what I do in this work is to just look at these different characteristics. So one of them, for instance, is like a sense of urgency, or I call it a chronic sense of urgency. So there's just always this like demand to be working, to be productive, to move quickly, right? And that's a part of how whiteness keeps us trapped. And so then how do we visit the antidote to that and learn how to embody the antidote, which might be something like spaciousness, finding a way to create more space inside of what feels like a schedule that's just always grinding, which can be really difficult. So yeah, it's kind of around that. And I think then it's like, how does that ripple out into these power structures? And specifically, it's interesting because I do actually have a lot of people who are queer in these programs in some way. And so I think that's really important because I think sometimes, like for me as a white queer person who used to be married to a Black woman, and I'm now partnered with Dr. Robin, a Latinx trans non-binary person, like I could just sort of slip under the radar with my whiteness, but I refuse to do that. And I hope that to invite other white queer people into this, because at least there's something there that they might be able to understand, even though it's nowhere near the same experience. There's something there that perhaps they've experienced a little bit of oppression enough to be able to open up and want to change. So I don't know if I'm kind of going around in circles, but I don't know if that answered your question, Phil.
I think I appreciate it. And I think that there's obviously a lot more work that white bodies need to be focused on in order to obviously create change, to create this change. And so within ourselves to allow more engagement to happen in a better way. To that end, I see Odessa kind of like chomping at the bit here for this list. I'm really curious, but I also have been in a lot of shared spaces with Odessa, so I kind of want to hear this list on a different light.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Aaron, for bringing that up. I think the thing that you're talking about from the body, I can tell you how it plays out in fruition. Here, I'll give you a perfect example. Knowing Phil for now, I think about 5 years now, me and Phil got into it a million times, right? And I also think that's a good test, because me and Phil got over shit like that normal people should get into it over it, right? But no one can come back and say something about like Phil's character as opposed, like, as far as being a race issue or something like that. Or I think he's done a good job of like checking into like any privilege he might carry, as a white male and all those things. So when Phil and me get into it, it's just like normal stuff that people should get into it, and we can get over that and move and keep moving through life. But some of the issues that I see the largest issues that I see, especially here in Nashville, is exactly what I think you're talking about. A lot of people who identify, in the LGBTQ community think that because you identify that way, that we can excuse everything else. There is a certain small of white male leadership here in the city who has an issue with me, not because of anything that I have done, but it is simply because I have called them out on that. If here we are fighting for, a minimum wage push to make sure that people in our city, get jobs before anyone else, to make sure that when we talk about diversity in MBEs, that there is proper representation, but you're on the other side pushing back, then yes, I am still going to take issue with that. But if every time that I try to take issue with it, you want to scapegoat it by the fact that you are part of this community, well, then we have to have a conversation about that. And that's what I was talking about at the beginning when I said there's this trope of anti-blackness that can still run through anything, or there are a lot of white, especially white males, but I would say white overall people who think that, well, I identify as queer, so I don't have any privilege. Yes, you do. I think Carrie put in here, you made a good point about it happening in the business world, but at the same time, I would say that is I have seen a lot of white, openly gay businessmen thrive here, and that not be afforded to anyone else, when it comes to being in the business world. And I've also seen them take that same thing. Don't think they ain't white Republicans. Don't think there's not white gay people who are fighting for equity, not to have change for everyone. They just want to have the access to be as oppressive as any other colonizer out here who's been oppressive in the past. And they say they want their fair due in that way. And so I think that is the conversation I see that we need to have, that is happening a lot when we talk about us being a community. That it means that you have to identify all the issues that we're going through.
Can I just piggyback off that for a minute?
Yes.
So I think, Odessa, absolutely everything that you said, and also even the ways in which we use language. So for example, we have normalized this term queer, and we have whitewashed it in such a way that we have left the culture of queerness to those who are deviant. And so even the ways in which Pride here in Nashville is set up, and I was on the board for a bit, it is corporate and whitewashed. And so what really is the work that we want to be doing as LGBTQIA plus identified people? Do we want to accelerate supremacy culture in the normalizing of a term? Or are we really interested in the margins of the margins, which is really where life is happening?
Thank you, Dr. Robin. Lauren, I see you have your hand raised. You want to come in?
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been very enlightening. I have so much to follow up on, but the original reason why I raised my hand was to follow up on the relative, what is her name? Erin. She mentioned coming together in white spaces. And I know that one thing that happens, particularly in corporate spaces, is that when you have like a work culture where there's multiple, you got a lot of colleagues, you got maybe 3 or 4 Black people, 9 times out of 10, the Black people are going to come together and talk. And one of the things that we were trying to actually institute as a facilitation practice is caucus spaces where white folk can talk, In those spaces, for me, I'm like, okay, I know I actively do this, and everything in every fiber of my being is to come together in community, so that when we are able to come together in spaces, either of trauma or communal space, other communal spaces, we can come together having processed together. And so I wonder if that resistance to communalism, which is, in my opinion, the antithesis of colonialism, where do you all see resistance in that? Because you all can be able to come together in whatever space you need. I don't know. This is me making a recommendation, but also too, just like reflecting on what I've gone through and experienced, and leaning into that Black thought and those Black practices that, work, just like our culture works. So that's just a part of our culture. And as we unpack these really hard conversations around inequities in policy, around intersectionality within our different spaces, because there's intersectionality that runs through all of it, and all of the inequities are worth impacting. And I'm not saying all lives matter, but when we're talking about these things, we also have to be really cognizant of how we work. And I guess that's my point. And I'm going to stop there. And I just want to know if you have any feedback or ideas around that.
Thank you, Lauren. Panel?
I mean, I can respond. I thank you so much, Lauren, for bringing all of that up. And yeah, I think you brought up some really important points, specifically that I think whiteness patterns us to be individualistic, and to think that we should be able to do everything by ourselves and we should be isolated. But that's also how it perpetuates. And so, like you said, communalism is like the antithesis to colonialism. It really is. And I think that what I was seeing, especially last year, when all these white people, all like my fellow white people, are sort of just waking up for the first time, some of them anyway, is, there's also this other thread of perfectionism that is so rampant that they're afraid to say the wrong thing, to look the wrong way, but like really it's not about them. And so I recognize that there needs to be a space for white people to come together specifically around race, to have this conversation and to do these practices, even though all the spaces are white spaces, right? Like, because we have power in that way. And to me, I'm just also answering a call from Resma Menicum, who's a cultural somatics expert. He's a brilliant man. And he's asked us to think about how we can reduce harm when we do have these conversations around race, because when we just throw everybody together in one room, people's nervous systems are activated, and it actually makes it worse sometimes. And then eventually, yes, the idea is that we do all come together, but I think that, right now, to me, the way to reduce harm is to bring white people together in sort of a caucus, and then go out and see how it ripples out into the world, and to form a community, that we actually can lean on each other and dissolve some of this individualism, because it's really eating us alive.
Thank you for unpacking that a little bit for me. And I what I pulled from it and learned from it was that we're fighting against perfectionism, and within all of us, and also too being overworked. So that's a whole nother thing, but thank you.
I don't know, this part of the conversation brought up another thing that I've noticed, just in my work before, for me. And like I've talked about it before with some people, but it's like especially around like especially like Black people and like Black young people being like demonized for not being conflict avoidant. Um, and a lot of times where like in order for us to work things out as a community, like you have to be able to say this is an issue and be able to like start working on an issue. But a lot of times like it's either like someone like starts saying something and then because you say it, then it's an issue. And then like it's not really like the issue is like being actually addressed. It's like, okay, you just started talking about the issue, so now you're a problem. And I really just think that like as we talk about all of this, and again, kind of referencing the work, that's one of the things I've also seen play out again. And this is like one of the issues like that where adults come into play, because lots of times like young people, like especially like the Black young people that I've worked with, they really, really, truly like are just voicing what needs to be said. And just because of the very fact that you voice what needs to be said, then someone else has like said that that's just not right, and then it becomes a whole problem that's created because someone's talking about a problem. And so really it's like no one's really being truly taught to like address conflict and like or at least even really being able to, really being like guided in addressing conflict, because people would rather be conflict avoidant. And I guess kind of like that kind of like whiteness kind of like does make people, and is trying to make more people to be that kind of like conflict avoidant, which is like antithetical to what we need.
I like to start a good conflict. It's been kind of fun for me, and that's been one of the things. So, in my day job, I work for HCA Healthcare, and I work in IT, and so we started this DE&I initiative this year. And so, one of the things that we pushed back on as the IT part of it was like, why is HCA not signing on to all of this bad legislation that's pushing through? And like, we went all the way up to the top. Like, we weren't scared of like facing the conflict, because we were like, hey, this is something like, if you want to really become a part of this community, then you're going to have to, and you're saying that you value all your, your LGBT, employees, and you want people to know that we are a friendly and welcoming place, then you have to put your name on the line. You can't go through places like, well, the Nashville Tech Council signed or the Nashville Healthcare Council signed. No, that's not good enough, because people are wondering, why are you not at Pride? Vanderbilt's out there in force every year. HCA, where you at? TriStar, where you at? You can't keep saying these things that you want to bring the community here. And oh, by the way, let's fix our records. Let's make sure that trans people can be treated appropriately when they come into our facilities. Me being an employee and also a patient of our facilities and knowing the treatment I get, I can't refer other trans people here, because why would I want them to come into a space where they are going to have to out themselves every single time they come into our facility, because we do not have a way to track that somebody is trans, and they may need a different set of testing, especially if somebody's coming in the ER at 2 a.m. They may not have the capacity to tell you that kind of information. And so that's where we really have to start pushing it, and going back to kind of the corporate white man gets a lot more privileges. We have an executive sponsor of our, I guess, our Pride colleague network, and he was on for Pride Month. And I was like, the whole time I'm like ranting to some of my friends. I'm like, he has so much privilege coming out of his mouth right now that he does not understand. Yes, it's great for you as a white man that you can be out and visible and be gay and talk about your partner. That's not everyone else's reality out here, especially for people of color. I did not feel comfortable. Like, I was so worried when I transitioned that I was going to lose my job, because didn't see anyone else like me, didn't have anybody that I could look to see that kind of information. So yeah, there is this big thing of like, there's a lot of privilege in the community that are not afforded to the people of color. It's like, it's always that adage of, you've got to be twice as good to go half as far. So I don't want anything else to take away from me, because I'm already Black. They see that when I walk in the room. Before I transitioned, I was, a non-conventional feminine person. So like, I wore male clothing all the time. And so it's like, yes, you can say this as an executive sponsor, you are a medical doctor, you have all of this privilege, but that's not afforded to the person that's working at the front desk in one of our facilities, that's doing registration. So those same things aren't there. So we've got to fix that problem. And I mean, like, that's an internal problem. So that's why I keep creating good conflict of like, we are not doing what we need to do for our LGBT employees and for our patients, even further from that, because our employees are a small base, but we're in 20 states and we have to deal with all these different regulations. But it's like the privilege is so embedded, and it's like we have to continue to break that down. So I'm like, hey, this isn't working. We don't have, our providers don't have to go through trans education. And guess what? It is a little bit different. They don't have the records that they need. How can we help fix this? And so that's where I've been pushing to say, like, we need to be out in Pride, because people don't know that if we're going to say we're welcoming and friendly, we've got to let people know that. And so not showing up at the big event of the year, everybody goes to Vanderbilt because that's the only place they see. They know they're not going to go to St. Thomas, and they'll come to HCA if they have to. But we need to change that dynamic and say that Vanderbilt's not the only game, but we also have to do a lot of education and reflection ourselves of like, how can we serve the community better? And so the nice thing through all of that is that I am seeing doctors reach out and trying to figure out how can we help change this narrative? How can we let people know that we're accepting and we're friendly? What do we need to change in our documentation? Who do I need to go talk to in IT to get these things fixed? So there is change coming. But that's one thing about when it goes back to, there's so much privilege embedded in saying, oh, well, I was able to do this. Well, you're a white man. That's a lot different than being a Black trans person.
Thank you, Ray. Dwayne, I want to bring you into this conversation from a My House and Nashville Cares perspective, because I think that there's an interesting through line from what Ray is saying on the corporate healthcare side to what Nashville Cares and My House are doing, and what you have been doing for many years in terms of engaging community with open and affirming care.
As Ray was speaking, I was remembering a few years back, probably 7-ish years back, when we were changing our testing, our HIV testing forms, and trying to be inclusive of the verbiage and doing all of that. Again, we're a nonprofit. We're here. We can quickly change those things to try and keep up with the times. There initially was some pushback because it wouldn't match the federal or the government way things were being done, but we were like, but we need to do this locally so that people understand that when they come through our threshold, our doors, that they can see themselves on paper or be able to at least check a box. And sometimes just other was just not cute. You just need something else. You need to have the other specific things on there. And so as Ray was speaking, I was thinking about that whole challenging thing where it was like, we still have to have it a one pager and we just need to have it this. And it was like, if it's two, it's two. Just make sure that we do it so that people can feel affirmed and seen, so that that first sheet, when you first come in, will be able to sort of alleviate some of the pressures that you're already feeling coming into a clinic space or coming into a space where you're wanting to get tested and know your HIV status. If you see that on there, regardless of what your surroundings may look like or what rainbow you may see or what gay person you may see there, you'll be able to go, wow, they see me here. I may be able to speak to this provider and really let them know what's going on with me. And so, that was something that we still, fight through. We try to change things. And one time I remember, I think it was maybe a couple of years ago, an individual came in and they actually wrote on the form, like they added some other, things on the form that we didn't know. And then they privately came up to me and said, I wrote some stuff down. I hope you don't mind, but I was so excited to see that you all tried. And that to me felt so wonderful, because sometimes it can come off kind of bad. Sometimes we do harm in our own community. So you're like, this doesn't look right. It's like, okay, well, how can we fix it? But this person chose to, write it on there, then come to me nicely. And I was like, I will try to get most of this on here. And thank you so much in the way that they did it. So I think what Ray had said, that is so important. And it's also important, and Phil and I have had this conversation just because of the Pride organizations and different things. It's really important especially if it's a healthcare facility or thing like that, and if they're going to participate in the June Pride which is much larger and much older, yes, then you have to have your asses at Black Pride too. Hello. You have to do that. And I need our white counterparts that get the larger monies from some of the organizations that will not ever probably give to us unless you speak up. So they're giving, hundreds of thousands of dollars to Pride. You can't give us 1,000, really? And so if I'm not at the table, I need someone else at the table to go, hey, I don't want you taking any money out of our pockets, but you know what? And this is what y'all did. Like National Pride did this over the past couple of years, where some of the big ones wouldn't give us the money for whatever reason. They were like, you know what? We'll get the money and then we'll filter it down to Black Pride, because of this is how we have to work, but then make that something that is known, so that when we do get to the table, we can make the fights and the other things, the applications to go, this is what we want to do. Especially for healthcare stuff. We're going to be trying to do some trans health very soon. We already do it, but not in a capacity that you're thinking. So HIV care, of course, and testing and all of that, but we're just about to do gender affirming care and all of that other stuff, and that's going to hopefully be happening in the next couple of weeks, if we can do all of that with a physician who has been doing trans health for many, many years. And so that's going to be something too, where we have to be ready to open the doors and have people look like themselves when they come in, regardless of race or ethnicity, excuse me, but just to be able to say, okay, this is another place to do that, and then share. It's the and then share that we have to do. So if someone's coming in and say, oh, I used to get healthcare here, this is what we'll do. Actually, real quick story, this weekend, or last weekend, sorry, was Borough Pride. And so we were out at Borough Pride and we were working, and I guess this clinic I hadn't heard of, Borough Clinic something. They have different care. They don't do HIV care, and the providers came over, 2 different providers. They were so happy to see us, but they said, "Oh my gosh, now we can send people to you, because we have this here." And I said the same thing. Oh, now we can send people. They don't have to come into Nashville because you have this clinic that is ready to do some things there, and you have the trans color flag, you have the rainbow flag. We will do that to each other because it's all about the patient and trying to share that. And it was just, when they came over, they came with that hugging, like, oh my gosh, we're so glad to hear from you all. Of course, they didn't know about us because they were in Murfreesboro, but we didn't know about them either. So now we can connect Murfreesboro patients with them, and they can do the same on our end. So it's really important that we sort of continue to share the wealth, because the patient is the patient is the patient, and they're going to go wherever they want to go anyway. So we got to make sure that they get the best care wherever they end up going.
Thank you, Dwayne. Everett, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this doesn't necessarily have to do with healthcare specifically, but I wanted to respond to a couple of comments that were made earlier. As a white man who has been in consistent white spaces, especially with CEOs around the city, just as were alluded to earlier, working in sustainability for quite a few years now, I've had to give pitches for sustainability projects to these folks. And essentially, I've been taught that you weigh people, planet, profit equally. And so you lay out, you give stakeholders the attention that they deserve, you give the economic argument the attention it deserves, and you give the environmental argument the attention it deserves, and you weigh it in a package. And I would say 90% of the time that I have had successful pitches, the executives only care about the profitability part, which obviously should be no surprise to anybody here. But I think I refuse to see profitability as the hard benefit and environmental and social as the soft benefit. And so, at least in my world, I'm trying to figure out how we can make those hard benefits on the same level as that economic argument. And so, and I actually just wanted to shout out the village at Glencliff, which I know, Odessa, you spoke at the launch event for that project. But in my book, like, that is excellent work that encompasses all 3 of those things and puts social benefit as a hard benefit. And so I think I just want to put that out there that it is a struggle to try to be an ally in these spaces of how do I do that in situations and settings like that. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there and say that I really appreciate being in the conversation and in this space.
Thank you, Everett. I want to go back into a conversation that, or a comment, if you will, that Reverend Cox made in the chat. And they say that they'd be curious of how this work is embodied, how this is, embodied work is felt by trans folks who may feel a particular closeness or distance from their bodies, and had a really interesting element that kind of went through in the chat, but I think that we were collectively talking about, and I'd like to touch on that. And then I want to pivot our conversation for the last half hour into community and what that looks like in a way that we can sort of continue to break down these walls and how we can build community among one another in better ways. So with that said, maybe go with Erin on this initial topic.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, Meredith and I have been exchanging on direct message back and forth. So, but I do appreciate this chance to articulate some of this because, you know, I think that, you know, dysphoria is a real thing. And it can be a real challenge when we're trying to work with our bodies. And so the way that I particularly approach this work is very much rooted in trauma-informed different like practices and experiences and modalities. And so we really focus on radical consent, which is listening to the body for a yes, a no, a maybe when we're invited to do something. And so I really invite people to take care of themselves and to cultivate that awareness of like, oh, this is making me feel incredibly activated. And I think I'm kind of going out of my window of tolerance right now. And so maybe I need to turn my camera off or leave altogether, or maybe I need to you know, put my belly on the ground, or like, you know, I mean, just sort of inviting again, like that choice, that radical sense of choice into the picture. And as somebody who's trained in dance, like I've been told what to do with my body for my whole life. And as somebody who's socialized as female, like it was very like, you have these choices and that's it. And so we spend a lot of time really just like trying to develop that those practices and those cultivating that awareness, which I think ripples out. So then if like you are a white person who's in a boardroom and something comes up, like maybe you actually do take care of yourself. Maybe you do get up and you lay on the ground for a minute. Like how like revolutionary would that be? Maybe you ask for a break. Like maybe you know, so I think there's a lot to say around this. But that's sort of my initial thing. And I just really like, the only thing we can really do is like just reflect the power back in the mirror. Like I don't have power over anyone but myself, and sometimes I don't even have that. So you know, how can we be reminded of that, and how, you know, how can I support that for my trans siblings?
Thank you. So we're gonna we've kind of blown past our schedule a little bit, but is great, but for some really fantastic conversation. And so I really appreciate where we've gone. I think for this last half hour, I want to talk a little bit more about what community looks like, right? And what it looks like from a perspective of how can we make change now and create more intersection within our communities. I mean, obviously, Odessa, you spoke to this earlier, and that we have continued struggle of working together in our communities between, when we're looking at our differences, and especially when some of our organizations are in the LGBT space are led by gay white men of power, and what that looks like. And so if we are looking towards the future, what changes can we be making, and how can we do that effectively?
Was that just to me, or that's just the community? That's anyone, right?
To anyone, but I maybe you want to kick it off.
I appreciate this. I think we all got our cliques of people that we hang with, and it's interesting as a mother of 2 children, as an openly gay woman who is co-parenting, and so I'm on some Black modern family type shit with a woman who I'm no longer with, but we're parenting together, and the father of the children. Thank God we all get together. One of the things that my children asked me is like, we spent a lot of time in Oakland for a couple of summers, and we were communing in spaces where there was as many, openly gay families or queer families in the neighborhood, and us having dinner at their house or them hanging out with their friends, and just seeing it normalized. I don't know, that would be great to build that type of space. And if it does exist, send your girl an invite. Here to where we're intentionally trying to grow those type of spaces. Like, there's a lot of good people here, and you never have issues with that, but having our space to do that within would be great.
Sorry, I was gonna jump off, tag on what you were saying, Odessa. I was trying to write my contact information in the chat though. For me, being in the role that I am in public administration, what I was going to say, it's a challenge sometimes wanting to have Nashville. To me, Nashville is more inclusive in the community than it might look on paper. And there's still a lot to be done and a lot more things to happen in the community. So I've only been in public administration for about 2 years, and I am constantly learning and constantly connecting with a lot of people, especially some of y'all that are on this panel discussion today. And one of the things that I have come across, I think it was Dr. Robin who mentioned earlier that, we talons are kind of honest, especially from the state perspective. Those in higher power, they kind of make my job very difficult. And I say that because, state laws, specifically laws regarding the LGBTQ community, preempt a lot of the local policies that go on. And it's frustrating to the point where sometimes I feel like giving up, but I can't because, I that's just not in my nature, but then also that's not what I was chosen to do in the role that I serve. So I things that I have done already, specifically with dealing with the transgender community, but also with the youth, the LGBTQ youth. I've been trying to be on boards like Nashville Launchpad or look at the policies that Metro has already regarding transgender healthcare and see how we can improve it in a way. Because it's those small nuggets that I'm looking for that the state probably won't step into, at least not yet, and say, hold on, what are you doing? So that's how I've been navigating or using my, I guess, my role the last 2 years. I say that because I'm trying to use this opportunity. I left my information out there in the chat, but even after this discussion is over, I still want to learn from you all because I know with all the experience that you all have had throughout the community, I can still take it on and use it in my platform that I've been given. And I will say also, being a part of, outside of the mayor's office, but being a part of Nashville Launchpad, I've realized that there are our transgender youth, but just our LGBTQ youth, homeless youth in particular, need help. There's just, we harp on affordable housing, which we all need, but then also I think we just need a community space in general. We have some, especially with the work that Dwayne does, and I know from what I've been told, things in the city, there used to be centers here perhaps that are just no longer here. So I'm trying to at least be the voice in a way for the LGBTQ community, but I'm also still very new. So I don't, I think I don't put myself in one conversation, one pocket. I'm still trying to take all the conversations that I've had in the past and just bring them to the table. So I say all of that. There are things that I am working on and that hopefully will come out soon. But again, the folks on the Hill just don't make it easy. And I'm sure you all know that.
When I think about community, I think about, we have, Nashville, Davidson County, but how many people are in community that maybe work in Nashville, but do not reside in Nashville? Like, I'm actually in Sumner County, is where I live and where I work. And so it's a much different dynamic in Sumner County than it is in Davidson County, and so it's just like also about supporting those kind of things, because having to always come into Nashville, you kind of seen like Murfreesboro prides have picked up, and I think Pulaski had one. So the places are getting prides, and so it's like, how can we continue to create that energy into, we always say like Davidson County and the 10 surrounding counties. Well, Sumner's one of those, and so it's like, I try to make sure to support. There's actually a local, we call it the Queer Corner here in White House, where we've got a queer-owned comic book store and a queer-owned bookstore in White House, Tennessee. And so, place you wouldn't think of it, but it's like, those are spaces where I'm able to talk to other queer people and, involve them of events and things like that. So I can't, like, Nashville, I think, does a great job, and Nashville Pride does a great job, but we've got to start getting into these smaller communities, because I think that's where we'll also start seeing more change happen, is getting to those places, because that's really I've been up here for almost 2 years at this point, and it's just a very different dynamic. But I'm also seeing a lot of people of color move out this way because they're getting pushed out of Nashville, because it is not affordable to live in Nashville. And so you're seeing them come up here. So it's like, how can we, support, the people of color who move up here that, I live on a road where it's, me and a couple other Black people, and that's it. And that's all I, see. But as I go into Kroger, I'm starting to see more and more people come up here. And so that's where we really start thinking about, like, how can we start spreading what we've built in Nashville out to all of these other places and bringing them into the conversation? Because I think that's going to be really important. And I think, to like Odessa's comments, like, what about families? Because I think that's a hard thing. I think queer families, a lot of times we feel like we're in silos, or people even trying to start families, or if you have like an interracial family, because that's like a whole nother set of dynamics and how you deal with that. And so, we've got to start building these spaces and building communities in an intentional way, but not just thinking of Nashville, but as of how do we start supporting the 10 county region that Pride's always talking about, and as we talk about in the greater middle Nashville middle Tennessee area. But that's where I think that we can really start seeing. I mean, we're starting to see it. I'm like, if Pulaski can get a pride, then we should be able to get a pride somewhere in Sumner County, like Hendersonville, Gallatin. Somebody should be able to do it. If we can do it in Pulaski, we can do it in Hendersonville. They may not like it, but we can do it.
I'll help you plan it. All right. Dwayne, Robin, Brian, any thoughts on community and what we can be looking at from a perspective of, again, this idea of fostering change? How can people get involved in your organizations? Where do you see some of the greatest needs still arising? And in order to obviously continue to move this conversation forward in a way that is helpful for our full community.
Well, I think people have started just putting their information in the chat, which is wonderful, and DMing everyone. So I think that's a great opportunity. Also, it sort of, bleeds into the stream of what you and I talked about, and many of the people on here previously that was part of the community visiting project that you led and that you'll be doing more things about in the future. So I think looking forward to that and still continuing those conversations and being able to have the space just to know about things. One of the things that just happened more recently, for those people who don't know about the My House facility and the space that we have a game room, we have definite room and spaces that are safe that people can come over to. But we just started working with one of the house ballroom communities, and so now they come and practice at the My House facility. And to their point, they didn't know about us. They knew about the things that we offer, but they hadn't been to the building, because of COVID and different things. So whenever there are groups, whether they're small or large, and you may have a space like we have a space, just please reach out. And if we are able to do it, of course, we'll do it. There's no charge for it, and we'll just make it happen so we can see each other's spaces, learn more about different things, and then be able to share, again, sharing the information so that we don't feel like we're all in silos and we can continue to work together when there's an opportunity. Because I may have a different type of space, but then someone else may have a different space, whether it be in the same county or a different county. Sometimes people like to get out, even though, COVID is still showing its ass. People still want to get out when they can. And when we can do that and still be socially distant and still even meet outside because we have a big area, sometimes that really helps when people feel that there's nowhere to be seen or heard.
I think the thing that I want to say explicitly, we're saying there's an implied message here, but I just want to say it explicitly, and that is we need relationship, and it's relationship all the way down for me. And until we learn how to be in relationship with radical difference, whether that be Black, gay, queer, trans, Jewish, Muslim, whatever, until we know how to be in relationship with difference, I'm afraid we won't survive ourselves. And so while we imagine this network of connections, let us also imagine real tangible practices to be in relationship with one another. And until we practice that on the daily, we're just going to keep repeating these conversations. We need imagination, and we need more than imagination. We need to implement that imagination. And so our work at the Activist Theology Project is to try to connect the dots for people and to be in relationship with people and to live out an ethical bind that counters the violence of this world and creates conditions for social healing. And so I just want to advocate for relationship on a tangible basis.
Yeah, and I agree with everybody else. Relationship matters, and I tend to think of things on a change model mindset. From and the first step would probably just be awareness, and awareness to education, and education to action, and then action to the end goal. And I think there a lot of I think that people are aware, which is a good first step. And I think what happens is that awareness goes into, let's do a checkbox action. So let's bring a Brian into our space, and let's put a Brian on our board. Let's bring a Brian to come speak in these spaces, and then we have the conversations. And after that, nothing else happens. And so Brian's voice is the only one that's amplified when there are many voices in our community who needs to be amplified. And so creating opportunities for marginalized communities to amplify their voices to be heard, so we understand what those needs are, besides the few people that we see all the time in these spaces. I'm not the only person here. Brandon's not the only person. Dwayne, I consider Dwayne a legend. but we're not the only people who voices are important in our city. And so when you think about, okay, who do we want to call on to come speak about certain issues? Reach out to us and ask people who are some other voices that we can hear from. But in addition, instead of doing the checkbox thing of, oh, let's do this event or let's have this person come speak, what is that actionable item that's going to push us to community? What are those actionable items that's going to push us there? And so when you are aware that there are marginalized communities and you're aware that there's a need and you have resources that you can put into those communities, those need to be the conversations that we need to be having for the people who are in power, who have those resources, to not just say we did a check mark thing, but how can we continue to cultivate those relationships beyond that check mark event or that check mark opportunity that you may feel like, oh, I did my thing, I met somebody and that's it. That's not enough. Put some money where your mouth is. We have homeless youth. We have Brandon, who is over at Launchpad, and they always need funds to do some. Send money over to Launchpad. I'm not even going to hype my organization up because that's not what I'm going to do in this moment. But there are many people on the ground who are doing that work. Send money to them to help them continue to do that great work. If you don't know how, bring those individuals to come to your organizations or your companies to do trainings, to speak to you about how to better serve and how to better build community and creating opportunities for everyone to thrive. And so I think that we probably need to have another conversation about defining in Nashville, what does community really look like? Because I think we may have different definitions of what that is. I think we have different definitions of what a success look like. And I think that until we get on the same page there, then we're just gonna always just keep having these conversations where those of us who are well known in our respective fields will keep running our mouths, and we just hear ourselves sounding really wonderful and great, regurgitating the same things that we know over and over. And so I'm looking forward to seeing some real change and having some real conversations. And yeah, let me stop because.
And yeah, everything that you were saying, Brian, and I would also ask too, just a little tangent from us speaking on community. We are Nashville too. So, I know several people who I would consider to be experts or resources that we should go to about issues, but because they don't identify them as LGBTQ issues, they don't feel as though they have the autonomy to speak on it. And I'm like, that is insane. We should be talking about taxes. We should be talking about infrastructure, job, criminal justice issues, and everything else. That, like our agenda is every other agenda, so just making sure too that we stand strong in those spaces as well.
Thank you, Odessa, Brian, everyone. Okay, well, on that note, I kind of want to leave it at that. I want to thank each of you for participating today and for this really robust conversation. There's obviously so much more that we can get into, and so many more topics that can be that we can branch out from in this space. And I am really looking forward to seeing what each of us can accomplish together in community and with this idea of working together. So with that, thank you all for coming, enjoying and engaging in this conversation. Thank you to each of these panelists. And we will be back at it next month with a whole nother topic. And hopefully we'll see some of these faces again. Thank you again.
Yes. And Phil, yeah. Before we leave, I want to thank you on behalf of the Center for Nonprofit Management. I am Dawn Stone, the Director of Equity and Community Initiatives, and this is my role and goal in life is to, right, Odessa, be kicked out of a job. So every month we are bringing this to you, and we're starting to add our affinity groups as well. We will have an anti-Blackness space in 2022 coming. We will have an LGBTQI+ space, and October we will begin our Native Voices space. So we have the 28th, so save the date on that. We're gonna have a very special day dedicated to the arts, the work, and the ways and the trauma associated with being of Native blood. So I'm excited about that. And Theo, go ahead and tell them what's coming up next month. I think it's you.
Yes, we are going to have a whole nother conversation on LGBTQIA plus lived experience and youth and what that looks like in our community. And so I am sure that some of these faces from the panel will be back in conversation with us. And I look forward to engaging in that conversation. So much more very soon.
Yes, and we love you, Phil, and thank you for taking up this full mantle and running with it. So let's continue to get work. And thanks everyone for being here. We will have the video available as well as the chat. The only thing they don't show are your privates. So everything that was above board will be published. So let us know how we can help you. If you need any resources or any information, or even want to start some of your own conversations, I am here, I am there, I am me, I am she. So give me a call. Let me know and we can talk and do some one-off things. Dr. Robin, we will be digging into religion. And when I have that big religion thing, you and yes, you as well, all of you who have a religious slant, I will be pulling on you as well, because we want to look at intersectionality as it relates to everything we do and everything that we are. And it's very important here in the South. I just had my queer daughter pass, and this is why I love this space, because she has no voice. And you feel have a lot, and others, the Odessas of the world. Yes, Odessa, I used to watch you hoop, can go. You have skills and you have things and resources that we need. So me as a parent of queer and bi children, it's very important that we keep this space and this conversation open. So I thank you. We'll let everyone go. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.